Modded bosses are a staple of many modding communities and are a way for the best of the best to push themselves further than what's possible in the base games. A couple of months ago, I found one of these bosses for the game Hollow Knight, which got me interested in learning the game from scratch so that I could attempt to beat it. But what I had set my eyes on wasn't just a standard difficult modded boss. No, I set out to be an infinitely harder version of an already harder version of Hollow Knight's Absolute Radiance, which by itself is already shrouded as one of the hardest bosses in gaming. If you think I'm overreacting, take a quick look at this monstrosity called Anyrad Radiance. For some backstory, Anyrad Radiance is a modded boss by a man named Absrad. The mod was built as a joke designed to be literally impossible, based off a much easier modded fight of the base game's Absolute Radiance called Ultimatum Radiance. At this point, Anyrad Radiance has 3 versions, as after each variant got conquered, people decided to make them even more impossible. For this video, I'll be taking on the 1.0 version, which to this day has only been beaten by 218 people as of the time I'm recording this. That number alone should tell you how brutal this can be, and so before we can even think about attempting Anyrad Radiance, there's a ladder of exponentially harder fights to make sure that we have enough mechanical skill to survive. Step 1 is to beat the normal Absolute Radiance, which then leads directly into the next step of beating the same boss on its ascended difficulty, where each attack will deal double damage. Then we move on to modded bosses. Specifically, we do Ultimatum Radiance, which Anyrad Radiance is based off, before finally making the biggest jump to Anyrad Radiance. It's probably recommended to include more steps before attempting Anyrad Radiance because the step up in difficulty is so large, but these are the steps that I personally took. Before we get too deep into it, I want to make sure that even if this is your first time clicking on a Hollow Knight video, you'll be able to follow along, and also make it so that if you'd want to take on this challenge for yourself, that you can use this video as a guide. But in saying that, there is a lot to cover, and so I'll try and go as fast as I can for these first few sections. For the basics of this challenge, by playing the Godseeker mode, we can play as a fully upgraded version of the Knight, where we have the maxed out melee, aka nail, health, aka masks, soul meter, aka soul vessels, and every charm and spell unlocked and upgraded. Unlike in my Steel Soul True Ending challenge, our main source of damage here will be the nail, while spells take on more of a utility role. The most important spell for this challenge is Descending Dark, with its decent damage and its ridiculous amount of iframes that we'll be forced to use to dodge some attacks. As for the Abyss Shriek and Fireball, they may be used for some extra damage here and there, but will mostly be used to stall ourselves in the air. Last thing before we start, I'm going to be talking about the mods I use along the way, but if you want a place with all the resources, I'll be leaving the link to the Anyrad Radiance Discord in the description below. I would very highly recommend joining and checking them out, because they are very great people and they've helped me a lot. So, now that you know what we're working with, it's time to climb the first step of the ladder. Absolute Radiance, or Absrad as I'll be referring to her from now on, is Hollow Knight's hardest base game boss, found in the Hall of Gods. The fight consists of 4 phases: the initial ground phase, the platform phase, the climb, and lastly, unlike the true ending Radiance, there's a final or barrage stage. In the first phase, Absrad has 6 moves, each dealing 2 damage, that we can split into these 2 categories. The face moves, as the name suggests, come from her face, with the sword burst that has 2 layers, the beam burst that triggers 3 separate times, and the orb attack where the orbs will slowly spawn in and home onto the knight's position. As for the wall moves, there's a wall of light that requires us to iframe through, 3 layers of spikes with gaps that we have to jump through, and finally a spike rain which will spawn 4 layers of spikes above us that we have to position ourselves for. We can also split this first phase into 3 more phases, where initially, the ground will be completely clear, and after a certain amount of damage is dealt, spikes start to appear on either side of the platform. As for the third sub-phase, when nearing the end of the first actual phase, the spikes in the floor will split to both sides, making us stay in the middle, where Absrad will then use Spike Rain until you hit her enough to end the phase. You then have a chance to heal, before we then climb up into the platform phase. The platform phase is the hardest part of the fight. We only have a few small platforms to stand on, and we have to keep attacking her as she teleports around, firing the same moves as the first phase, with the exception of the Sword Rain. The only saving grace of this phase is its low HP compared to the others. In the whole fight, Absrad has 2181 health, with the first phase taking 1150, the platforms taking 750, and then the final taking the rest. Once we deal the 750 damage, Absrad does this short animation to mark the phase change before spawning a staircase of platforms for us to climb. From here, she starts firing lasers from above, each one giving us half a second of warning before it turns solid and deals damage for another half second. As soon as the first beam fires, a new one spawns every second, leaving almost no time to breathe as we make our way up. Finally, after climbing to the top, our final arena is made of 2 platforms. Here, Absrad will start her orb barrage, which she'll spawn an orb every 2 seconds as she teleports between platforms. Initially, when starting the final phase, Absrad's health will be set to 1000, and after she gets down to 719 health, she'll teleport to the middle of the arena and take one last nail hit to win the fight. Now getting into actual prep, right now, the build we'll be using is the Stalwart Shell for its extra iframes after getting hit, Quick Slash and Unbreakable Strength for its increased DPS, Steady Body, which I'll go over in a second, and for now, the Fragile Heart Charm for its 2 extra masks. We're also allowed to use the Legacy version of Quick Slash by using a mod to make it cost 2 notches instead of 3, because technically it's possible to obtain in the base game, meaning we can also put on Grub Song for extra soul after getting hit. For this first boss, the main goal is to start getting comfortable with the aggressive playstyle that we'll need for later. This mainly means that we want to start getting comfortable with face dancing, which will allow us to deal constant damage to her. Face dancing has 2 forms, both needing the steady body charm so that we aren't getting flung around when we hit her with our nail. For the first and easier method, we can do a downward slash to pogo and then let go of our movement keys and hit again. Then all you need to do is alternate this pattern with the correct rhythm. This style of face dancing is good for when we have a few free seconds, but because of its lack of mobility, it makes it hard to dodge attacks such as the orbs while also keeping up the DPS. That's where the second variant comes in. By alternating left, down and right slashes, you can move in a circle around her face. This doesn't do any extra DPS, but will make it easier to dodge fast moves because we're already moving. Now that we've covered the basics of face dancing, let's look at how it's used in the real fight. When the fight starts out, you have a few seconds to face dance on her while she isn't attacking. As Absrad starts her first move, we have to use D Dark to iframe through the attack, and then instantly dash over to her and start dancing again. What makes incorporating face dancing so hard at the start is learning the timing of when she'll start a move. Very often, I'd get greedy and push my luck on how long I could be on her before she attacked. After a while, you start to build an internal timer on how long she'll take to attack after each move. But for now, it's better to do it sooner than later. Moving on to the second phase, we want to play a lot more conservative. For the plat stage, Radiance can teleport to any of these positions. Ideally, we want to stay in the middle platform so that any other platform is still in reach. The main trick I used for this stage was when Absrad teleported in front of one of the platforms. Here, while she's doing any move but the orb attack, we can stand on the same platform and deal a constant stream of hits to her without having to face dance. Once dealing enough damage, we start the climb. The only thing I can say about this is that you want to develop a rhythm here and be climbing to the next platforms as the lasers are going solid. This way, by the time the next laser's coming out, you'll have refreshed both your dash and double jump by landing on the platform. Finally, for the final stage, we need to be continuously pogoing her to stay above the screen. When the orbs follow us off screen, they'll get deleted, meaning this phase in theory isn't that hard. All we have to do is pogo off her a couple times, then dash to her next position to rinse and repeat. But in reality, this is where nerves come into play. At this point, you'll probably have tens, maybe even hundreds of attempts going through the first 2 stages. But when you hit the climb, it all sets in. Every attempt up until that point it was to get to this very spot, and so it becomes very easy to mess up a pogo and get hit by an orb, or just fall into the void. But if you can control your nerves enough to hit her 10 times, she'll teleport into the center for one final hit. To go through my journey beating Absrad, when I was first learning the game, I debated whether I wanted to use controller or keyboard as my input method. From my previous video, I had decided on controller, as if I were to use keyboard, I wanted to use similar keybinds that I used for Undertale, with the arrow keys and whatever other buttons I needed. I knew that if I wanted to be as precise as I could be, it'd be best to use keyboard, but because my nice keyboard is 60% and I didn't want to go back to the keyboard I was using for Undertale, I just decided to play on controller for the first 70 hours of playtime, thinking it'd be precise enough. After I beat my last challenge though, I knew that with what I was trying to do, I'd need a bit more precision, and so I decided I wanted to make the swap to keyboard. But again, I faced the same problem with not wanting to change board, so I made my own keybinds on the spot with the most natural feeling buttons that I could. Almost every game I've played in my life up until this point has been using similar binds to these, so contrary to what my friends have said to me, these keybinds were perfect for me. The swap wasn't as brutal as you'd expect. Considering the 70 hours of muscle memory built on controller, it only took me a couple hours to adjust and reach a similar skill level to what I had with the controller. The thing that helped me out the most was throwing myself right into White Palace to do Path of Pain for the first time, which took about 2 hours, and so after that, I headed to the Hall of Gods to take on Absolute Radiance. Fair enough. Easy boss. Beating the fight for the first time was my first step towards Anyrad Radiance, and it only ended up taking me 15 minutes to beat her on a tuned difficulty. But that first victory wasn't enough to move on just yet. At this point, my mechanics were way too sloppy and inconsistent to move on to Ultimatum, and so I decided to take on the Ascended difficulty. Ascended difficulty means that every hit we take will deal twice as much damage. Fall into the void, 2 masks. Get hit by an attack, 4 masks. Also, not only does she deal more damage, she also has extra HP, meaning that we have to be more consistent at dodging for a longer period of time. What? That's fucked up. That's actually fucked up. After a little bit of practice with invincibility, it didn't take me too long to start getting runs to plats. But it did end up taking me another 2 hours before I finally got this run. Okay, there's Ascended. Overall, that wasn't too bad. I think I've been going for, well, I played for a little bit earlier today, but right now I've been going for an hour and a half. Not terrible. Quickly before we move forward, you may notice that Radiance and her arena looks a little different between fights. So that we can see progression, I've decided to use different skins for each fight. Once again, you'll find every skin I use in the Anyrad Radiance Discord server below. Also, if you're enjoying this video so far and want to support me on my YouTube journey, then please consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot more than you know, and I'll try to make it worth your time. Now that we understand the roots of this boss, it's time to move on to our first modded version. Ultimatum Radiance is built upon Absrad, designed to be a harder but still fair fight. And so to cover this, first we'll go through the changes made to the fight, and then I'll go into what we need to learn for this boss and my journey beating it. Starting with phase 1, the differences are already apparent. Now, most notably the base moves have all been buffed. For the face moves I mentioned before, both the sword and beam burst shoot out faster with less telegraphs. And for the orb attack, more orbs spawn faster with less initial time for us to react. But those buffs, while being substantial, aren't what I'd say make the boss. That award goes to the 2 horizontal wall attacks, which now come from both sides at the same time. This means, at certain points it's possible and almost likely for the walls to force a hit, and so now we have to deduct through them. Finally, for the initial moves, the sword rain has also been substantially sped up and condensed, meaning we now have even less time to navigate tighter gaps. Along with the buff moveset, the ground phase has its own extra stage. Now, between the 3 stages it already had, a new stage is introduced where the whole bottom of the arena will be covered in spikes. This phase will add an extra 250 HP, but fortunately isn't as hard as it seems. Initially, this boss was intended to deal damage when you deduct onto the spikes, similar to what happens in the Colosseums. Meaning with the original version, the only way to avoid damage in this phase was to constantly pogo on top of them. To counteract this, in this stage, Ultimatum was built to slow down our attacks by a significant amount, but a couple of people didn't like this change, mostly because in the base Absrad fight, the spikes disappear whenever you touch them. So, an updated version of the fight was made to allow deducts on spikes. Because the move stage slowed down, this once extremely difficult stage got turned into one of the easiest, allowing us to consistently face dance on her and deduct after the long telegraphs. Not much changes for phase 2, except for the fact that she keeps the buff moves and teleports around faster. Similarly, the climb is also only changed to shoot faster with less of a telegraph, meaning the strategy for that also stays the same. The final phase, however, has gotten significantly buffed. First off, for the orb barrage, a new orb will spawn every 1.6 seconds rather than 2 seconds. On top of this, there's now another 2 sub-phases added, where once we hit the first threshold, the right platform will disappear, and then after hitting the second, spikes will spawn in on the left platform. The strategy stays identical to the way we played it before, but to accommodate these extra 2 stages, a total of 250 HP is also added here, meaning if we add it to the existing stats, the total fight has been brought up to 2681 HP. Now, the final phase will take 18 hits to end the fight, so there's an even bigger chance for nerfs to take over and end the run. But if you can hold on, then you will have conquered the first modded step. Getting into the strategy of the fight, the charm setup stays the same. The start of the fight also stays roughly the same, with the only new additions being the forced deducts on beam walls, slightly faster timing on the face dancing deducts, and now the addition of these new pogo dashes. Now that the spike walls come from both sides, with the initial side having 3 walls and the other having 2, most likely we can't spam deducts for every single wall. We also only have 1 dash and 1 double jump charge, meaning we can't just fly forever. A key mechanic that you don't really think about while playing the normal game is that when you pogo off something, you gain back both your dash and double jump. Meaning that if we're able to pogo off the spikes, we could then use the dash and double jump to chain together more dashes and more double jumps. To do this, to make sure we aren't going too high after we pogo, straight after the swing you hit the dash button. This way, we stay at roughly the same height as when we hit. To practice doing this, you can use the Absrad configurable attacks mod to make her only do the spike walls. Then, using unlimited health with the debug mod, you have infinite practice doing these pogo dashes. Something to keep in mind though is that the spike walls continue vertically off screen, meaning that you can't go too high to try and go over it, because you'll just end up taking damage to off-screen spikes. Besides that, the way you fight the boss doesn't change too much, so let's start to look into my journey beating it. My first time attempting Ultimatum was barely a couple hours after I'd done Ascended Absrad. I'd actually practiced the pogo dashes the day before, just because I thought they looked cool, and so even on the wrong version of the mod, my first ever run made it to the very end of Plats. After a short bit of time wondering why the spikes were hurting me, I found the updated mod I mentioned earlier in the Discord, and after that, I started to get a few deep runs into the fight. The main thing I was struggling with at this point was staying on her while she teleported around. Every time I try and chase her down, I'd never make the distance with my dash and jump, so every time I eventually reached her, she'd be ready for another teleport and the cycle would continue with me barely doing any damage. The fix for this was to change the order that I pressed the buttons. In Hollow Knight, for whatever reason, you're able to get more distance out of your movement when you first dash and then double jump. This is best seen in White Palace, where some spots require this pattern, but what I was doing was the opposite. It took an hour or so for me to ingrain this pattern in my head, but after I was able to consistently do it, it allowed me to get through the first phase a lot more consistently. Another thing that I started seeing at this point, that would become a continuous theme across this whole challenge, was the mental fatigue of doing this same short fight over and over again. Especially when the fights only last 50 seconds each time, with barely any making it out of the first phase.
I reckon you're starting to get brain rotted by it. I think you should just take a break.
Prob.
You're slowly dying faster and faster every round.
Yeah, okay. This wasn't very new to me or anything, as I've experienced this with most of the super mentally taxing challenges I've done, and so I just used my normal workaround to play for about an hour or so, take a couple hour break to work on the video, and then eat dinner and repeat the cycle until it was time for bed. On that first night, I managed to get one run into the final stage, but after getting so close, my brain started to slow down and I decided to call it a night. But luckily, the momentum carried into the next day, because almost instantly, I managed to get this run. That was another 17 minutes today. Oh my god, I was so nervous, bro. I thought that was gonna take a lot longer. It didn't hit me until the climb. There you go, that was Ultimatum Radiance. All things considered, that wasn't that bad. There's definitely a step up, but... Actually, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I'd actually beat it in the day before, in about an hour of playtime. But because I was using the Godseeker Plus mod, a setting was automatically enabled that made the final stage of the fight go through its whole HP reserve rather than stopping at 720 HP. I'd ended up hitting her a total of 25 out of 18 times, so in theory that would have been it, but I ended up beating it after 17 minutes the next day, so it didn't really matter. So if you're using this mod, make sure you turn off this setting. Now that we've completed Ultimatum, let's take a step back and have another look at the ladder. You noticed before that so far I've marked each step as being twice as hard, which from my experience is pretty accurate. But you'll notice I left the jump to any Radiance a mystery. I've done this intentionally so that if you're trying to follow along, you won't get discouraged. Because going from Ultimatum to any Radiance has been the biggest step up in difficulty I've ever seen. For comparison, the hardest jump in difficulty I've faced so far was going from 49 to 50-20 in FNAF's UCN, which after 2 weeks of grinding, from my experience I'd say was about 4 times harder. There was a reason I said at the start that there should be more steps before attempting her, because this is, and I kid you not, at least 40 times harder than Ultimatum. This is the fight that was built never to be beaten. Finally, after climbing the mountain of steps, we can finally get into the real challenge and the main part of this video. Everything we've done so far is the bare minimum to start learning Anyrad. And now that we're here, we'll be deep diving into the fight and the different strategies created for it. But first, let's take a look at what's actually changed. Starting with the individual moves, the face moves have all been buffed tremendously, but the sword burst, now not only will the spikes come out faster, they'll also have less of a telegraph and a third layer. For the beam burst, now instead of alternating beams, after each beam is fired, they'll stay active until the last one is finished, making the room for dodging very thin and sometimes even impossible. As for the orb attack, this move has gotten the biggest buff out of everything. Now, Anyrad will spawn way more orbs, with not only less time in between spawns, but also absolutely no telegraph. This move, which was once one of the easiest moves, can now literally be impossible to dodge when you're positioned poorly. The wall moves on the other hand haven't changed too much, with things like the spike rain being sped up and condensed. But what makes the biggest difference with them now is how much faster Anyrad teleports around the arena. We'll go more in depth with this in a little bit, but all the Radiances have a condition of having to teleport after certain attacks before doing another. Because of the speed Anyrad teleports now, specifically with the beam wall, it's pretty common for her to start an attack while the walls are still going, meaning you now have to dodge both attacks at once. On top of the buff moves, once again, Anyrad has been given a significant health boost. Now, the initial empty platform phase has been bumped up to 650 HP, the spike waves to 750, the full spike floor to 450, and the sword rain to 300, putting the first phase at a total of 2150 health, which is just over 2/3 of Absrad's full health. Also, unlike with Ultimatum, the full spike floor phase won't slow down the attacks, as now when you touch the spikes, they're intended to drop down for a bit. So now, while she's doing all her attacks, we also have to play floor as lava. Moving on to the Plat's phase, we actually have a change unlike in Ultimatum. Now, the beam wall has been replaced by this super buff version. You quite literally only have a few milliseconds to react in D-Dark before it reaches you, but that by itself isn't even what makes the phase so hard. Unlike in the other fights, where for the most parts you get to choose where you want to be, the orb attack and beam walls force us to stay in the top middle platform, as otherwise the moves can be quite literally impossible to dodge. Not only that, but with the beam burst now staying for all 3 beams, sometimes, once again, from the position you're currently in, it can be physically impossible for you to dodge it. Luckily, the HP here stays at 750, because otherwise, this would easily be the hardest phase, but instead, that award goes to this next phase. With all the unfairness shown in this boss so far, it's pretty clear Mr. Fred wasn't intending anyone to beat this. But just to make sure, he decided to make the penultimate phase one of the most unfair things I have ever seen. Unlike in the previous fights, where the lasers would spawn in after half a second of telegraph, here, each laser will just appear. There is literally no chance for you to react at all, and especially as you get closer to the top, there's not a chance you can make it through the stage the same way as normal. And now, once reaching the top, the pressure and nerves of 1,000 attempts takes over as you try and do the same pogo that we've done so many times before. But this time, with the stakes higher than ever before, so is her health. Now, for this phase should be set to 2000 HP, meaning with the fight ending at 720 HP, we'll have to hit her a total of 42 times. Not only this, but once again, the orb barrage has been changed to have less time between spawns. So not only do you have to deal with the nerves, you also have to be more alert and ready to react to a bad spawn. If you can do this, then you can beat any Radiance, but that is so much easier said than done. Now that we know the changes, let's take a look at the strategy on how to beat her. Starting the fight, we can once again face dance on her to deal some early damage. Now that the telegraphs for every attack are very little or non-existent, you almost have to pre-fire the D-Darks in preparation for the attack. As you get more comfortable with the fight, your reaction time will lower and you can start reacting to the moves. But especially at the start, this was a huge struggle for me. In the first phase, it's crucial we start to master the aggressive playstyle. Now that Anyrad's first phase has more HP than Ultimatum's first 2 combined, it's gonna take a lot longer to make it to Plats. And so with some moves that are straight up undodgeable at times, it's crucial we get through this phase as fast as we can to mitigate RNG. On top of face dancing, for both the sword burst and sword rain move, once they're reaching the final layer, we want to jump and pogo off the final sword to reach her face quicker. This can let us get an extra hit in each time, which by itself doesn't sound like much, but over time, those extra 32 damage hits can turn into hundreds of less HP. Also, because of the increased attack frequency, we're now going to have to D-Duck a lot more often. This means that most of the time, you're working with literal scraps of soul, so you have to be hyper aware of where that soul is being used. particularly in the full spike floor phase. To avoid damage from the spikes, we have to time D-Darks to make them disappear. But because we have to do this during, for example, the spike wall move, that goes on for a relatively long time, it's very common to run out of soul. What I always kept in mind was that if you get stuck in a bad position with no way out, it's better to take the 1 HP of damage from the floor instead of the 2 from the wall. As after you get hit, you'll have enough iframes to make it through, and maybe even enough soul for another spell from the Grub Song charm. As I mentioned before, the buffs to the orb attack makes it the hardest move of the whole fight, and so now, there's literally a required way to dodge it. Even if you're able to predict when she'll do the attack, simply de-darking it won't leave you invincible for long enough. You'll almost never be able to dodge it by randomly running around because of how many orbs spawn in such a short time. For the orb attack, Radiance can only spawn orbs within this area, between these 2 circles and inside the rectangle. This means, to not have an orb instantly spawn on us, de-darking from inside the small face hitbox is required, and then from there, we have to use the iframes of both the D-Dark and Shade Cloak to get out of the spawn box. From here, we'll still have another 6 or so orbs chasing us down, so you have to do a full height double jump and then dash over the orbs as they orbit you. There's many different variations depending on when she does the attack, where she's positioned, what move she does afterwards, and so many more variables, but for the most part, this is the general way to dodge it. Besides those few things, it's literally all about getting comfortable enough to dodge every attack. And if you can do that, all that's left for phase 1 is to hit her enough during the spike rain to end the first phase. Now moving on to the Platts phase, make sure you have at least 1 cast of soul, just in case she uses the beam wall instantly. Now, make your way to the top middle platform, where from here, we have to play patient and be ready for her to do an orb barrage at all times. Because we don't have a consistent platform like in the first phase, the orbs become a complete disaster to dodge. The most consistent way to dodge them is to be in the top middle platform, where the second we see them spawn, we jump into the air and dodge the other way. Then, line yourself over a platform and D-Dark to tank all of the spawned orbs. If you aren't in the middle platform and happen to get the orb or wall beam attack, then 90% of the time you'll end up getting hit. And so to stay in the best position possible, there's really only 2 safe times to go in for damage. First of all, after a beam wall, Anyrad will teleport once and then stay in the same position for a few seconds. During this time, she won't fire any moves until she teleports for a second time, and so during this brief moment, you'll be able to get a few free swings in on her. With this, if you can get good luck with spawns, you can even nuke down half of the phase. But again, for consistency's sake, you have to avoid being greedy, because if you get the orb or beam wall again, you'll be losing more health than you can afford. Besides those 2 attacks, you can mostly dodge the others like normal, maybe using a D-Dark here or there. And as you approach the phase change, make sure you have at least a cast of soul and are prepared to start climbing instantly, because now we make it to the strictest part of the whole run. To understand the strategy for the climb, we need to zoom out a bit. The climb is made of 16 platforms before we finally reach the top. Obviously, climbing 16 platforms with 2 no telegraph lasers a second is pretty much impossible. So, to actually complete this, we have to maintain invincibility the whole way up. But how can we do that? In the game, there's a useless charm called the Boulder Shell. This charm makes it so that when we heal, a shell will spawn in to protect us from damage. In the normal game, this charm is completely overshadowed by other charms like Quick Focus or Shape of Un, because compared to them, the shell is very underpowered, wasting soul after being hit, and also only having 4 charges. But for this fight, when paired with the Stalwart Shell, it gives us barely enough iframes to climb 2 platforms while staying fully invincible. The problem with that though, is that to use the Boulder Shell, we have to be healing, meaning with how unlucky you can get with Beam RNG, you'll most likely run out of soul before getting the chance to climb. So to counter this, a technique called Boulder Flickers were made. Boulder Flickers work by tapping the heal button in rhythm with the lasers. The boulder shell activates only a few frames after starting the heal, so because your soul meter starts going down after the shell activates, we can continuously bring up the shell and put it down before losing any soul. That's not all we need to know though. You see that after the boulder shell gets hit, the knight gets knocked into the air for a few frames, and that short amount of time is barely enough to throw off the timing and make us run out of invincibility. So we also have to learn wing buffering. In short, wing buffering is where we instantly click jump after being knocked in the air. This way, instead of landing on the platform and jumping, we're able to instantly use the wings to barely get enough height to bounce off the platform sides, which will barely be fast enough to stay invincible until starting the boulder flickers again. With those two things in mind, let's take a look at how you actually complete the climb. As we're reaching the phase transition, we want to be in the top middle platform with at least one cast of soul. As soon as she teleports up and the platforms spawn in, we have to speedrun all the way to platform 8. Along the way up, wherever possible, we want to be bouncing off the sides of the platform, as doing this will speed up the climb a lot. But still, you need to get really lucky with laser spawns to take no damage. Now that we're on platform 8, we start boulder flickering until the beam hits us. Then, instantly we do a wing buffer and bounce off the side of platform 9 to land on platform 10. Right before landing on platform 10 though, we need to be holding down heal in case the laser is on top of us as our invincibility runs out. Best case scenario, the laser instantly hits us and we can repeat the same strategy all the way up to platform 14. But what will happen a lot of the time is that the laser will avoid you like the plague. To make sure you stop flickering at the right time, you have to time it so that as soon as the current beam disappears, you start flickering. But if you're like me, then that shit is impossible to do, so you can just spam and get lucky. Now, as I said before, we repeat this pattern up to platform 14, where at this point, if everything's gone correct, we'll only have one more boulder shell use. Unfortunately, we now need to climb 3 platforms, including the platform of the final phase. Meaning, for the last platform, we'll always run out of invincibility. There is a consistent workaround for this though. Straight after using the final boulder charge, we bounce off the side of platform 15, and instead of landing on number 16, we also bounce off the side of that. Instead of trying to land straight away though, we want to jump out as far as we can, and as we reach the peak of the jump, the laser will be ready to switch over. So, using the shade cloak, we can dash through it and double jump to make it to the final stage. Ideally, making it into the final stage, we want to be using the double jump to go to the left platform. The Radiance has a 2 in 3 chance to spawn on the left side, so our best shot at cleanly starting the pogos is to bet on the left. Now, we just have to start pogoing. But because of how much nerves will be affecting you at this point, we can look a bit deeper into the mechanics of the fight for a bit more confidence. We know that Radiance has 3 spots to teleport, the left, the middle and the right. So you'd think that if she's currently in, say, the middle position, she'd have a 50-50 chance on where she'd teleport next. But instead, because of how she's coded, it's actually 2/3 to 1. The way she works is each position is assigned a number 1 to 3. Then, as she goes for the teleport, she'll roll a number to go to that corresponding position. But she can't just teleport to the same location, so instead, if the same number is rolled, then she'll -1 to that number. Meaning if she's on the right, there's a 1 in 3 chance for her to spawn on the left, and a 2 in 3 chance for her to spawn in the middle. Same goes for the other scenarios, where if she's in the middle, she has a 2 in 3 chance to spawn on the left, and for the left side, a 2 in 3 chance to teleport all the way to the right. While this does sound pretty good, keep in mind, this is still gambling, and won't always be correct. But it's still a good thing to remember for those key moments. Last but not least, keep in mind, you can deduck on the platform or into the void if you feel like you'll miss a jump. It's much better to lose some damage over getting pinged in the face by an orb, because I found that when you lose the rhythm on your own terms, it's a lot easier to recompose yourself. And with that, you will have beaten any Radiance. After seeing everything this challenge holds, you might be wondering why I decided to take it on. And to be honest, the only reason I wanted to do this was because I thought it looked really cool. I don't remember exactly how I first found this fight, but something about it, probably having to do with the insane skill level of players who beat it, really made me want to take it on. As I said in the intro, this fight was literally the reason I played Hollow Knight in the first place, and so when I finally reached the skill level where I could start attempting it, I excitedly started the grind. When I started out, I decided to focus purely at getting better at the first phase. My thought process was that while I couldn't reach Plats, there's no point in practicing it. So until I reached it from the first phase, I just completely ignored it. And thus, the pre-Plats wall was born. Because I wasn't using the Boulder's Shelf or anything, I instead kept the Unbreakable Heart Charm on to make my runs last longer. But even with 11 HP to go through, I was barely making it a few hits in. God damn. God motherfucking damn, dude. Whilst practicing the fight, I was using a health bar mod to track progress and PBs, so quickly I'll overlay the thresholds for each phase. For the first day, I could barely make it to the first quarter of HP, mostly because I hadn't started learning anything about the boss yet. But a key thing to note for this period of time was that I was really enjoying the fight. Similar to what I felt when I played 50/20 for the first time, because there's always 100 things happening, my ADHD brain got to take over and go to town. This continued for the first few days, as I was slowly pushing my PB further into the first phase, but even then, that was mostly based on luck, and how long I could go without getting spammed by the orb attack. By day 3, I'd already surpassed the time it took me to beat the previous bosses, and was coming up on the combined total. I was starting to learn the timing a bit more of when to dedark, but I still wasn't getting anywhere close to the Plats threshold. At this point, the problem wasn't an underlying issue, it was literally just that I wasn't good enough at the game yet. And so as I kept playing and adjusting to the boss, I started to push my PB to the full spike floor and bordering the spike rain. If I de-dived, I fucking get to the sword rain. Ah. It was during this time that I found the guide that I mentioned earlier. And specifically, the part that helped me the most was learning about the links between teleports and attacks. If you didn't know, the attacks that the Radiances do is entirely based on how many times she teleports. If we look at this table, we can see what the next move will be depending on the previous attack and how many teleports she does. For example, after a face move, if she teleports straight away, then we have to be ready for another face move, and if not, then be prepared for any one of the wall moves. The important thing to look at with this though is the chances of a nail rain. With the way we're supposed to play this fight, we're meant to be constantly on top of her, meaning we're always going to be in that top half of the screen. Because the nail rain can spawn literally straight out of anything, as soon as she finishes a move, it'll always have a chance to spawn directly on top of us. So for this, it's important that after each move, we deduct to mitigate those chances. With this in mind, as day 5 approached, I was noticing that I would always run out of soul. Looking back, this was just because I wasn't playing aggressive enough, meaning that because I wasn't getting enough hits in, I wasn't getting enough souls to constantly dedark. But just for a while, I decided to change my build. Now with that, after 5 days of grinding, the pre-Plats wall was broken. Because I'd never done Plats before, I knew I wouldn't get far as soon as I reached it, so at the time, I was very pleased with this performance. In the run, I'd gotten a decent bit into the phase, but this was a bit misleading. I'd ended up going into the phase with 8 HP, but considering I was using the Heart Charm, in an actual run I would have only had 6. I then proceeded to not dodge a single attack, and so instantly, that 6 HP I would have been on just got evaporated. Only then did I start getting good RNG, and so all the damage I did afterwards was mostly thanks to that. Now that my record had made it into Plats, I wanted to start practicing it to build towards the next wall, But holy shit, I just could not understand the fucking patience strategy. The general consensus I picked up from talking in the Discord is that the Plats is the easiest phase besides maybe the final phase. As I said in the strategy, all you have to do is wait for a beam wall and then nuke half of her health. But from my experience, she knows exactly what you want and will never give it to you. Genuinely, I've never had a worse time than when I practiced any Radiance Plats. Sometimes I'd make it through the phase hit list, and then other times I'd go 10 plus attempts in a row barely getting a hit in. Remember before when I talked about final phase gambling? Well, the same can be done here. The Radiance follows this path with a 20% chance of going where the arrow faces and a 10% chance of any other spawn. This is a lot less significant because it's still an 80% chance for her to go wherever she wants, but I want you to picture this scenario. This is entirely hypothetical, but imagine you go into the phase with full HP. Then you go into the middle platform to do the normal strategy. She then doesn't spawn on you, which is fine because it's only a 10% chance, and charges up a beam burst with no possible dodge. Alright, whatever, we still have 7 HP. She then teleports to a different spot, which once again you're not able to hit her at because she'll just spawn an attack and kill you. In that spot, she does another beam burst, which somehow you dodge, but it leaves you on the bottom middle platform. She then finally does the wall beam, which fortunately you're in the middle for, so after de-darking, you can finally run up to her and damage her. But from the bottom platform, you just can't make it in time. So she teleports away and starts another attack. Unfortunately, you end up taking a hit to the sword burst, so because you're getting frustrated, you go to heal. But now, the second you go to heal, she does another wall beam. So you waste a boulder charge. Now, finally she goes to a punishable spot, so you get a few hits in and make it back to the top middle platform. She then teleports as far away as she can physically go, and does the orb attack. So you have to dodge right and de-dark the final orbs. But now she does another wall beam when you're not ready for it. After the wall, she teleports to the same bad position that you can't reach from the bottom platform. So you go back to the top middle to prepare for another attack. But because she finally has a good spawn, and you're so annoyed at this point, you just go to attack her while she charges up her next move. But as soon as you de-dark to the platform below, she spawns, you guessed it, another wall beam. And then at this point you're really pissed off and just start inting, so after making it to Plats at full HP, and also healing 2 masks in the process, you lose the fight while barely making it halfway. This again is entirely hypothetical, but is exactly how 90% of Plats attempts end up feeling like. After practicing Plats for an hour and a half, I felt alright at it because I'd gotten 1 or 2 good runs past the phase, which obviously now we know was just luck. But I was starting to get a bit frustrated at it, so for the next few days I decided to continue doing phase 1 until I had another run or so to Plats. Okay, it's been a week and I just wanted to give some thoughts on this challenge. This challenge is more similar to 50-20 than any of my other challenges, which is what I was expecting going into it. Especially in the fact that I'm resetting after like a minute every time. But the difficulty compared to 50-20 is like, it's no joke. This is a lot harder. It's like a different kind of, I get a different feeling with this challenge. Like other challenges, when I lose them, it's like despair. Like I'll be frustrated for like 10 seconds and then it'll be despair. I'll be super sad because I lost an hour run or something. But this one, I'm just like, it just gets really frustrating because I know the boss is meant to be impossible. Obviously, it wasn't built fair. It wasn't built to be fair. So, you know, every time you get hit with bullshit, like the wall or barrage into wall, spike walls, spike rain, fucking wombo combos, there's like not much you can really do about it. And I think knowing that it's built to be that way makes it a bit better, because like it's what I signed up for. But yeah, I do wish I was seeing a bit more progress. This is the first day I haven't progressed, which I don't think is a bad thing, because it's just building consistency still, but it does make me wonder how long this will take for me to finish. Even though for the next day and a bit, I wasn't able to get any runs past plats, I was making it deeper into the first phase more consistently. So after a couple hours of grinding, I was finally able to make it back to my PB. Okay, we made it back. That might be a new record again as well. This is my second time. I think after maybe one more time, I think I'll have to start using Boulder Shell. Nice. I don't know. I don't know what to say. That's just nice that I'm back here after yesterday. With a week now just passed, let's take a look at where we stand in this challenge. Right now, I've had 3 runs to plats, I'm getting more consistent at the first phase, and I've had this really cool dodge. Holy shit. Holy shit. Well now you know I don't have invincibility on. We've currently made it through the first phase wall and are sitting very comfortably in the plats wall. But most importantly, my mental is still in a pretty good state, as I know I'm still adjusting to the learning curve. Unfortunately, this however wasn't going to continue into week 2. After ending the previous week with my 3rd run to plats, it was time for me to start focusing more on practice. But with the inconsistent nature of the phase, playing that section for more than an hour left me more frustrated than I can describe. Okay. That's enough. Since after I took a break, I still couldn't stomach any more plats practice, and in the previous session I'd made it past the phase a few times, I decided to shift my focus towards learning the climb. For the climb, I used an extra strategy called the Cameron climb. As I said before, we want to be invincible the whole way up, but from what I talked about in the strategy section, the climb up to platform 8 is entirely luck based. This is what the Cameron climb was made to fix. By instantly climbing up to platform 5 as fast as we can reach the trigger for the void to start moving before the lasers even start firing. We want to barely hit the trigger while not landing on the platform and instantly deduct the platform below us. Then as the void is about to take us, if we open our inventory, then as we spawn in, we gain control over our character instantly, rather than having to wait for the animation to play. We can then use the large amount of iframes to climb up 3 platforms, making it all the way to platform 8, where we can then use the normal strategy. This way, while only taking 1 damage, we can be completely safe the whole way up, instead of relying on luck that can sometimes end the climb before reaching the 5th step. This strategy wasn't without faults though. Especially as I started learning it, climbing up fast enough to avoid the lasers was very challenging for me. I wasn't following the optimal path upwards, so a lot of the time I'd get hit before I could properly start up. Also, even when you do it perfectly, it's possible that in the small time you're waiting for the void to reach you, that the beam fires on your location. Thus, dealing 2 damage from the beam, 1 damage from the void, and cutting off a very big chunk of iframes, meaning it's almost an instant run killer. But not only this, I also really struggled with all of the other strategies in this section. I sucked at the boulder flicker timing, I didn't understand wing buffers at first, and even when I did, I struggled to get enough height to make it to the next platforms. Each of these problems adding up to me barely making any progress in the phase. But from what I was told, this phase was the hardest to learn but easiest to master, so I was able to thug it out and finally get my first somewhat decent climb. Second now, thank you. Ugh. Okay, well, that's fine, I guess. We'll take that. As the next few days came and went, I started to get more consistent with the climb, but the frustration towards plats practice only continued to rise. I'd been practicing stringing together plats in the climb, and so after 4 days of practice, I tried to see if I could finally break that plats wall. I'll be real, I think I've been kind of underestimating my skill at this point. Mostly like I've been really thinking, I've been thinking I haven't been playing enough, and that's making it take a lot longer. It's kind of degrading my skill, but I mean, I've just gotten to pretty much spike rain 3 times in a row with 9 HP instead of 11, so I mean, I guess it's fine. But yeah, I think I just needed... I need to get the plats down. I just can't, man. It's so fucking hard. It's so hard. Although I wasn't able to reach plats in this time, as I said, I was struggling with my confidence. I was only playing a couple hours a day, and compared to the time I'd put in with the first few bosses, it felt like I was really hindering myself. I'd given the first phase a few attempts the day before without using the heart charm, but didn't find any success. So doing this was like I'd woken up a new man, and from here, my confidence shot up. This confidence wasn't for nothing though. As I forced myself to play later that night, I continued to have the same success, and my gameplay started to look a lot cleaner. I was now getting comfortable with dodging every move, well, except for one. Let me introduce you what I call the orb wall. As I mentioned earlier, due to how much faster she teleports, when she does the beam wall attack in the first phase, most of the time she'll do another attack while the wall is still on screen. And one of those attacks is the orb attack, which, if you remember earlier, requires a specific dodge. But how are we meant to do that dodge if the wall's in the way? Well, most of the time, you don't. You sort of just have to accept the hit and avoid taking another, which by itself is pretty annoying, but whatever, it's what we signed up for. But where it gets so much worse though, is when that move is put between a huge string of long attacks. There's a few more things that I'm yet to cover on why this was such a frustrating experience. But the most frustrating part in my opinion is when she spams the cancer attacks over and over and over. I genuinely don't remember a less satisfying feeling in gaming than when you're in the zone and all of a sudden she decides to teleport to the complete other side of the arena. Especially when after that she does a wall attack, which is paired into another wall attack, that then goes into an orb wall, that then goes into another orb attack. Literally, like, while writing and reading the script, like, the thought of it is just pissing me off. Like, you can't understand it unless you've done it yourself. By this point, my patience with practice was wearing thin, so going into this session, I decided to mess around with half damage runs using the Godseeker Plus mod. I knew I wasn't good enough for real runs, so I thought this was a pretty good compromise. And so it took a little while, but I was finally able to get an attempt to plats. Practice the climb. Climb's not good enough yet. Like, I can't just... I'm just gonna raw dog the climb. My climb's not good enough. What am I doing? Even though I'd finally made it to the climb, it was heavily soured by the fact I still couldn't get past it while taking half damage. Mostly, you can see that I didn't start the climb instantly. So when I finally did reach platform 5, I'd already taken 2 hits. I hadn't practiced the climb nearly enough, and I felt really stupid for wasting my time while I obviously wasn't ready for it. After this death, I got off for the night and just stewed in my thoughts. But when I woke up the next day, I had a new plan. So far, I'd only practiced the fight in its own sections. So I wanted to practice the full fight with invincibility to get a feel of how the whole fight would flow. This surprisingly helped a lot, and it also didn't feel like a chore to play. I played multiple hours over and over just beating the boss, trying to take less damage each time. But most importantly, this also helped me get used to the final stage. The final stage is the easiest part of the whole fight, and so with enough practice, you should be getting it done in 1 or 2 attempts, so me doing this now was very helpful. After a day of this, I could sense I was getting more comfortable, so going back to playing on half damage, I set out to beat Anyrad Radiance. I don't even know what to say. That's Anyrad Radiance half damage complete. That's pretty cool. And just like that, I was 1 step closer. All things considered, it hadn't taken me very long to get the half damage clear. From when I started, it really only took me an hour of playtime, so I decided to start mixing real runs into practice. The way I did this was to do phase 1 until I got a run to plats. Then I would practice plats until I got a run past the climb and repeat. This mostly worked because the mod I was using to practice plats required you to reach it first. So this method of practice ended up being perfect and really helped me out. Despite the continuous success I was finding though, at the same time my frustration kept growing day by day. Even though I started getting semi-frequent attempts past phase 1, you still have to keep in mind that I was sinking hours of attempts into failing the first phase. Now, let me introduce to you the last point of frustration. For most games, and specifically seen in the Souls series, if you're spamming inputs, the game will usually buffer your actions. So even if you press roll or attack slightly too early, the game still remembers it and your character will do the move as soon as they can. But in Hollow Knight, it's a bit different. If you press a button even a frame too soon, then it's tough luck. It just completely eats the input. So things like trying to jump right after a dash, or doing a quick down slash into a double jump, will sometimes just not happen. And because of how fast paced this fight is, that tiny gap between inputs is all it takes to instantly lose your momentum. And it's not like this was a rare occurrence either. It happened almost every run, and especially when you combine that with the annoying move RNG and also the pretty common misinput by me, it only made me more fed up as time continued. As the week was coming to a close, I was still stuck in the same places where I'd started. But it's not like I hadn't improved. With the newfound consistency, I was on the cusp of breaking the Plat's wall, and so I set out for one final push. Oh, that was good. That was good. I got the first 2 thing as well. That could have been my first run to the final stage. It really could have. That felt good. And with that, the Plat's wall was finally knocked down. After a week of struggle, I'd finally made it through the whole second phase in a real run. And I'd also made it a very solid distance into the climb. So after this, I was very happy with what I had accomplished. And rather poetically, that is where week 2 ends. Going into week 3, let's take another look back at the progress I'd made towards the challenge. Now, I was getting more consistent runs to plats, with 1 in every 15 to 20 attempts reaching it. On top of that, I'd just broken down my biggest wall, and even managed to have a decent chance at the climb for the first time. But with each success, along with it came a whole load of bad runs, RNG, and overall frustration. By the end of the week, I was reaching a level of anger I haven't seen in myself for a long time, but since I was so close, I stayed optimistic that this would be the final week. For the first day, progress was almost instant. After about an hour of pain, I had managed to beat the fight from the beginning of the Platz phase, so now all that was left was to piece together the rest of the fight. But despite that success, all the attempts for the rest of the night were tainted with bad teleport RNG and dumb mistakes. And that pattern seemed to continue into the next day. Something that stood out to me at this point was my declining motivation towards the challenge. When I was starting out, I was playing upwards of 4 to 5 hours a day, but then after a week went by, I'd slowly stop playing it, lowering my average playtime closer to 2 hours a day. And then now, some days I would play for less than an hour. Each time I forced myself onto the game, I was left feeling worse and worse, and that's when I noticed a familiar feeling creeping back in. I've always been very competitive as I grew up, and along with this, I also had a history of some pretty bad rage. Way back when I was 14 years old trying to go pro in Fortnite, I'd broken 6 different monitors and punched a hole in my wall out of frustration. And that's not something that I'm particularly proud of, but the reason I bring this up is because as I grew up, I was able to calm down and fix my rage habit. I completely stopped destroying things out of rage, but I was never able to completely get rid of it. Although in saying that, after I stopped playing Valorant and competitive games in general, I've been a lot happier and by association, a lot less angry. But this fight was bringing it back out of me. I know I keep harping on the fact that I was angry during this challenge, but it's because I'm really struggling to convey how frustrating this actually became for me. As I was approaching the end of this challenge, it really did start to affect me like it did back then. And I'm honestly surprised with the force I was putting into some of those desk slams that I didn't have any permanent damage. And so now, with me feeling like this, I could only force myself to play the game for so long. That day, after throwing a run to the climb with 7 HP, it felt like my luck had completely run out. But if there's one thing I've learnt from every challenge I've done, it's that right when things feel the worst, that's when the next breakthrough comes. No, man, fuck. Fuck, dude, fuck. Oh, that was so close, dude, that was so close. I got like the same nerves as, I don't know, honestly it wasn't even, like it was a lot of nerves, but it's not even that bad compared to some other stuff I've done. I can do this, I can 100% do this. I'd barely made it into the final phase, but it still shot my confidence into the sky. I'd only lost the run to an orb practically spawning on me, so next time I'd make it there, I was confident I could get it done. A key thing I pointed out was the nerve control I showed during that final phase. Compared to the nerves I felt during that final Sans fight in the Undertale no-hit, these felt like nothing. So similarly to what happened in Undertale, I knew that now I'd gotten that nervy run out of the way, I was ready to beat it. After that last run, my motivation was at an all-time high. I was now so close to beating this challenge, so after a pretty long break to work on the video, I decided to practice the final few steps to make 100% sure that I beat it the next time I made it there. The next day, after a good night's sleep and a quick warm-up, I was ready to try my luck once again. But what I wasn't expecting was that on my literal second attempt of the day, everything started to click. I should have dedarked, man. I had 2 HP. If I dedarked, I would have just gotten hit one. I mean, fuck. My complaints were all in hindsight. Sure, I was thinking about dedarking, which would have potentially saved this run, but it was a really hard call to make. This death, while a little frustrating, proved to me that I was able to do this. The first run wasn't just a fluke. If I was able to get a run in 3 minutes of attempts, surely I'd be able to beat it today. And so once again, to make sure I didn't throw my 3rd run to this phase, I did some isolated practice to make sure that I was perfect. What am I doing? I'm fucking nervous, man. That should have been the one. That should have so been the one. I missed a hit, man. I just missed a hit. I hit like a fucking frame too early, bro. You're kidding me. You're fucking joking. That was so good as well, man. How many fucking attempts am I gonna get? With each attempt making it to the final stage, I was getting more nervous each time. And that definitely wasn't helped by the fact that each time, it was taking me longer and longer to get there. But perhaps the worst of all, I felt robbed by that last attempt. I'd gotten 28 out of 42 hits into the final phase, and up until that last swing, my execution was literally perfect. I was always above the screen, so the orbs had no chance to hit me, and yes, I was feeling very nervous, but I'd managed to lock in and was playing as if they weren't there. But still, I ended up hitting my attack button only frames too early. After the death, I straight away continued with attempts to keep the ball moving, but with the time between each attempt rising, I started to question if I'd wasted my chance. Had I just got unlucky with my attempts earlier, because now she wouldn't even let me out of the first phase. An hour after my worst death, I still was having no luck, and so after my frustration built up too much, I forced myself to get off for the night. But I just couldn't let myself rest. I said that today was going to be the day I beat this. I was so close now that I just had to get it out of the way, and so I launched the game up at 2 AM to keep the dream alive. Oh. Just don't fucking teleport ever, bro. Like, just one. That was the wrong way. With each passing moment, each bad RNG combo, each deleted input, each mistake, I slowly started to reach my boiling point. I just don't know what to do. That's so annoying, dude. And at the peak of it all, it finally brung out that destructive rage that I'd gotten rid of so long ago. I had just teared whatever I could get my hands on, and for this, it ended up being one of my favorite pairs of pants. I know it sounds very stupid that I got so upset over a pair of pants, but it really wasn't about that. I was now so angry that I'd reverted to breaking stuff, and to top it all off, all I could think about was how I was going to put it into this video. There was one last factor that had been tearing away at me this whole time. But it's not actually a part of the challenge itself. Instead, it's related to this video. I like to look at my videos as their own story. My first big project was me testing the waters. The Undertale one was me battling with my ideals, and even my last Hollow Knight challenge was me pushing my limits in editing. Each video had a story to tell, each challenge had meaning to me. But something you guys don't see is that after the 50/20 video, I developed what I call content brain. These stories happen organically, especially with my Undertale project that happened to be the most impactful thing I've ever created. But even though the stories have to build themselves up, it doesn't stop my brain from trying to piece together something out of nothing. I always try to build the stories as I go, which cuts off the chance for something real to come from it. Luckily, with the Undertale video, I was able to avoid this because I had literally given up on making the video. But for this one, it was different. I said at the start of the journey section that my only reason towards making this video was because I thought it was a cool challenge. But to me, that just wasn't a good enough reason. Throughout the whole journey, I was trying to figure out the meaning behind this challenge, even though there wasn't one. Before now, the whole story was literally, I haven't been this mad in so long, and then overcoming that anger. But every time I got more and more frustrated, all I could think about was how am I going to write this down, how am I going to convey this frustration, and I realized that I wasn't able to just feel my emotions anymore. Everything I was feeling wasn't for me, it was for the video, and I felt like I had lost control. So now, while at my most emotional point, all I could think about is how I'd be putting it into this video, and that became too much for me. For the first time in a very long time, I succumbed to the stress and broke down into tears. It's a bit hard to be so open about stuff like this, but by doing this, I hope that it can help at least one person feel like they aren't alone, if they feel a similar way to this. In my mind, this challenge deserves so much more than a quiet, meaningless journey. But in the end, that's all I could offer it. I kept trying to force a narrative to spice up the video, but in the end, that's what caused my downfall. After I'd calmed down a bit, I had a hot shower so that I could productively sort through my thoughts. Thinking like that is not healthy, and it also doesn't allow the true stories to blossom. It's okay for a video to not have a deeper meaning behind it. Sometimes it really is as simple as, this looks cool, I want to do this, and then just doing it. In fact, that's what makes YouTube so cool. You can post literally whatever you want and have people care about it still. Whatever passion I've had and uploaded, I've always had people watch and enjoying it, even with my shitty getting over it speedruns. And while yes, in my opinion, the best videos have a deeper meaning behind them, not every video can be like this. And that's what makes those ones so special. That doesn't mean that every other video without a story sucks. When I finally stepped back from my setup, I was able to properly relax for the first time in a few weeks. The final wall of the challenge was still going to be there waiting for me, so I went to bed with a new mindset and a weight lifted off my shoulders. I realized that a lot of the rage was produced by stress that I was putting on myself to get the challenge done that night. So now that I'd both stopped worrying about the story and the time constraints I put on myself, almost all of the annoying things suddenly didn't affect me as much. See if I can make it out of fucking plats with full HP and 2 casts of soul. Yeah, I mean that's plats for you, man. That's plats for you. Full HP going into plats, and you literally just like can't do anything about it. As the day progressed, I started to get a few good runs. I knew another attempt at the final phase was coming, and I was just hoping that it would be my last. With my 5th time to the final phase getting so close to the end, you'd think that I'd be upset. But honestly, I was more just relieved that my worries from the night before were being proven false. I now knew that any run had the potential to make it to the final phase, and in that, all I needed was one lucky attempt where I went into the phase with more than 2 HP. But that's what makes this next part so embarrassing. Half an hour after my last PB, I managed to get a run into Plats with full HP and some leftover soul. I then got either a bug or very good RNG with Anyrad staying in the same position, spamming the same move. This doesn't invalidate the run, by the way. And well, let's just watch what happens from here. What is happening, cunt? Do I have to reload my fucking save? What just happened? What just happened? Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, so let's go back to where we left off. I ended up reaching the end of the climb only taking 2 HP, as I was able to heal using the leftover soul from Plats, but as I reached the peak, something instantly stood out to me. The right platform was nowhere to be seen. In my mind, what had happened was that because I didn't reset the fight after making it to the final stage last time, and was instead using the mod to auto reset the fight, the platform just hadn't returned from the last attempt. I also ended up taking a hit to the beam on my way up because I hadn't timed my dash correctly, but because I always jumped to the right platform, which by the way we confirmed was worse earlier, I was bewildered by what was happening. In the heat of the moment, all I could think about was whether this run would still count, because I didn't know if this affected the boss in any way. So now, with my best run ever, and pretty much 5 HP coming out of the climb, I ended up throwing that run with only a 1-hit PB. But before you chalk it up to me forgetting to reset the fight, I figured out what had actually happened to the right platform. In the Plats phase, you're able to overdamage the boss, meaning that all the extra damage we deal in the phase transfers into the next one. This usually doesn't matter, because the health bar gets reset to 2000 HP anyways, but the platforms are tied only to reaching their threshold. So because of my insanely good RNG in Plats, I'd ended up doing so much damage that the platform had disappeared on me. So now with this context, I had just thrown a perfectly legit run with 9 HP into Plats, 7 HP into the climb, and pretty much 5 HP going into the final phase. After this generational fumble, I played for another hour with a few runs making it to Plats and the climb, but I ended up deciding to get off and call it a night. But same as the night before, a force pulled me back onto the game, but this time it wasn't out of stubbornness. At 4 AM, I told you guys my sleep schedule's cooked, I launched the game for one final time. That was the fucking one, dude. Fuck. Give me one more fucking chance, bro. I promise you I'll win, man. I promise you I'll win. Please give me one more chance. I can't be that loud. It's fucking 5:40 AM. Oh my fucking god, let's fucking go, man. I was about to fucking yell, holy shit. Oh, thank the fucking Lord. This is so hard, dude. This was such a fucking hard challenge. Dude, I've been so frustrated the last couple of days. Just the bullshit that this fight has just given me. But I knew one more attempt was all I fucking needed, man. Like, after the last time I made it to Plats, I was so confident. Like, I wasn't even nervous after the last time. And this time I was like barely nervous. Oh, let's fucking go, man. And with that, I'm now the 221st player to beat any Radiance. I'm not really sure how I want to start this outro, so first of all, I'm going to rank this challenge compared to my other ones. Because if you're anything like me, that's probably what you're the most interested in. Any Radiance places very comfortably in second place. I wouldn't say it's as hard or as mentally challenging as the Undertale no-hit run, and to be honest, I'm not sure much will, at least for a while. I'm still a bit mentally scarred from that one. But don't get me wrong, this was still very hard. It took me about 40 hours to beat, and around 2.5 weeks of my life. And looking back, this challenge took a lot more out of me than I thought it would. Not because of how difficult the fight itself was, even though it obviously is very hard, but more because of what I talked about earlier with the whole content brain thing. I spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not I actually wanted to include that section, because it felt kind of ironic. The whole point of that section was that these videos don't need a story to be good. And then by saying that, it became the story. But because it was such a big part of where my head was at during the challenge, leaving it out would have just felt wrong. If you're interested in where I'm going from here, I know I've done 2 Hollow Knight videos in a row, but I think I'm now out of my Hollow Knight phase for a bit, so there probably won't be another Hollow Knight video for a little while. That said, I do have some ideas to come back to the game in the future. Maybe a hitless P5, maybe a hitless any %, who knows. I'm not going to lock myself into anything yet, but if that's something you'd like to see, then let me know in the comments. For now though, I have quite a few other challenges that I want to do, and I think I have some really fun ideas lined up. So if you've liked my content so far, then you'll probably enjoy those too. Lastly, before I sign off, I'm happy to announce that I'm streaming here on YouTube. Right now, I'm trying to stream twice a week, usually Mondays and Thursdays from 2 to 4 PM AEDT. Mostly just as a way to keep up with the community, and to force myself into playing other games besides the one that I'm making the current challenge on. I'll also be streaming some future challenges there at some point, so if you want to hang out or get a sneak peek at whatever I'm currently working on next, make sure you stop by. Besides that, I want to thank you so much for sticking with me to the end of this video, and I hope to see you again in the next one.